I'm Rebekah Lester, and I'm an attorney with Triangle Smart Divorce.
And I'm Lauren O'Malley, and I'm also an attorney at Triangle Smart Divorce. And today we're going to talk about stay-at-home parents and how they can start the separation process and actually get divorced. Because I think a lot of people who are in this scenario with no income feel trapped, like they can't do anything. They can't get their separation because they don't have income coming in.
Absolutely. And what people may or may not know is that in North Carolina, in order to get divorced, which is that final kind of step in the process where a judge declares that your marriage is no longer intact and you are legally separate individuals and entities, is that you have to have been living separate and apart for a year and a day. And a lot of people, particularly our stay-at-home parents, are financially concerned about what does that mean.
And the hard part, and I think what really is paralyzing to these individuals, is how do I, if my spouse won't move out, how do I move out when I have no income? I can't qualify for an apartment. I can't pay even if I do qualify for an apartment. How can I actually get this separation? And, you know, we're not talking about victims of domestic violence. You know, there's different options for that. But really what you're going to have to do is start preparing. It's better to start preparing in advance, knowing that this is an option and not making an impulse decision. I'm going to go and then I got to figure out how to do it now.
Absolutely. And I think there's a difference between, kind of the long-term options, which we know are, alimony, child support, which may be available to certain clients, property distribution, which might involve getting substantial assets depending on the wealth of the family unit as a whole. There might be money in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months that is coming your way and flowing that is going to make these kind of short-term pain. But how do we get through that short-term pain?
Right, because like you said, that could be a year from now for the asset division. And, yes, there could potentially be child support if there's children, and there could potentially be spousal support depending on your length of marriage and any infidelity that may have occurred. If you are a stay-at-home parent and you have had an affair, you and your spouse knows or can easily find out, then you need to be prepared to not be getting any type of alimony. You could still get some post-separation support for a year. But, a big thing is that you really need to start talking to your friends and your family members, because in my experience, and I know not everybody has this option available to them, but in order to really start this process, family steps in and tries to help. If that's co-signing a lease, providing some type of support, if you're able to move in with a friend or family members in the short term, that could be an option. But if you just stay in the house and we don't start planning to figure out how we're going to get you separated, then nothing's going to change and you're going to continue in this marriage if you are unhappy. So yes, money is always a concern when you're a stay-at-home parent, or even if you're not a stay-at-home parent, if you just don't work. I have a lot of cases where spouses, you don't have to work. Let me work. You stay home. And, there's no children and you're just like, I gave up my career, could be a later in life marriage, I gave up my career, I've stayed home, I have no income now. And bigger concerns are, I don't know how much he or she makes. I don't have access to any funds. I don't know what our bills are. I don't know anything like that financially because you've been kind of kept in the dark. So preparing in advance is really important, because when you're still in the house, if you can get access to financial statements, that's going to be helpful. Open up your own bank account in order to start the preparation. Maybe squirreling money away if you can. And maybe you don't have access to that, but if possible, granted, any money you put in an account is marital money. Be clear about that for the most part, unless it's an inheritance or some other, specific thing. But if you're getting money from people and you're putting it into a bank account, you may have to divide that. But in the short term, that could be there in order to help you get separated. But I mean, you're probably going to have somebody co-sign a lease for you. So you need to start thinking about that and talking to your friends and family. And while it's not ideal, credit cards, loans, I mean, those are all things that you can use to help pay your expenses and attorneys in the short term.
Absolutely. I always am talking to clients about how are you going to get through this really uncomfortable hurdle of getting from still cohabitating, where one spouse might be handling all of the lion's share of the financial load, to living in two separate, distinct households, because you have to be in two separate, distinct households in order to start the process of separation in North Carolina. I typically tell people to first, look around you. If you have access to shared banking accounts, sometimes just because you're a stay-at-home parent doesn't mean you don't have access to the banking accounts. That money is capital that you can use when it comes to putting a deposit on an apartment or renting a U-Haul or paying for your utilities or whatever it is. If you still have legal access to it, your name is still on the account, you can use those funds. You can use those funds to pay your lawyer's fees. You can use them to kind of get yourself started. I always say, it's typically easier to give money back than it is to get money. So if there's, say, $10,000 in a savings account and you want to go in and take $5,000 and put it in a separate account with your name on it, just know that that means that when we're dividing assets, we're going to consider that that account has already been split and divided, and you're not going to get an additional $5,000 later.
Correct.
But you can go ahead and do that in most circumstances.
That's correct. But I always tell clients, don't take more than half if you can help it. Take half, but try not to take more than half unless you guys have agreed. Now, in some cases where people are amicable enough and we can get the process started when they're still living together. So that way, when it's time to actually separate, everybody knows what's happening. Everybody knows what the support may or may not be, and they can plan. It's easier to plan that way. But that's not for everybody, because if it's tense in the house, if, it causes massive arguments, yelling, fighting. I mean, you don't want to do it in that case, still live together. But in some cases, I mean, you can still live together and work through this. We can get into mediation, do document exchanges. It just depends what your comfort level is. And obviously, when you do a consult with us, we will go through that with you and determine if your case is one that we can realistically negotiate while you guys are still living together. And then maybe we can help make that separation a little bit more comfortable, because you know what money you're going to have when you actually separate. But a lot of times that's not possible.
Yeah. And I do have clients who are still cohabitating with each other. They're still maintaining kind of the status quo financially while we are negotiating. Lawsuits haven't been filed. We're not there yet. Hopefully we're not going to be there. We're just in a process where we are discussing either temporary or permanent support, and either temporary or final distribution of assets and property. And that way, when that stay-at-home spouse or stay-at-home parent is going to an apartment complex and saying, hey, I want to rent an apartment, they can say that they're receiving this amount of income as child support, as alimony, as some other kind of monetary compensation, or they have the ability to make that down payment in full, or whatever it is the apartment is requesting due to their credit history or what have you. And that can really help. But you're correct. It's not available in all or even most situations, because typically there's reasons why you are getting divorced, and people are either unable to or do not want to continue to cohabitate while they're negotiating these very emotional and difficult issues of separation.
That's absolutely correct. I mean, I've done plenty of mediations where people are still living in the same house and going home afterwards to the same house, and it's fine. But a lot of times that's not possible. And like you said, maybe we can get an interim agreement. Just, we're not saying this is the final support number or any type of final division of assets, but hey, we're going to agree this person's going to move out. They're going to take X amount of money with them, and the other spouse is maybe going to pay, or even the spouse moving out is going to pay to the spouse staying in the home, the mortgage, or a certain amount just on a temporary basis so we can actually get separated. Again, that's probably for a little bit more amicable people, A lot of people come and say, what about, I've read about a divorce from bed and board. Divorce from bed and board is not a divorce. Be clear about that. The problem with divorce from bed and board is, yes, you can file it while you're still living together, and you're essentially asking the court to declare you two physically separated. Some judges will actually require somebody to move out. Some won't. I think there's disagreement in the legal community whether or not they can. But the problem with divorce from bed and board is that you're making these allegations about the other spouse, that they're abusing alcohol or abusing you or having affairs, and you're still living together, and you're not going to get a court date for probably 3-4 months. And you got to live with that person. So that's not always a good solution either. I mean, a lot of times you do have to figure out and talk to people, because you're actually going to have to move out if you really need to a separation.
Yes, I have had clients in the past. I very, very rarely do these divorces from bed and board. There's very limited reasons, and they have very limited uses in the process. But I have had clients who have done them, and when we do, we sometimes have to discuss safety planning for what will happen when that spouse is served with paperwork that might have some pretty significant and severe allegations in it, and what that could look like. And so we discuss, hey, if this were to escalate the situation, what is your plan and how you are going to react to make sure that you or potentially your children or other loved ones living in the home are safe. Obviously, then we're kind of stretching into a realm of domestic violence, and we take different steps and actions, but that is something that we have to consider.
And one thing I would do before separation, if you have time, and I hope you do have time to plan this and not be impulsive, is to consider, if you don't have a credit card, get a credit card. Even though nobody wants to have debt, I mean, that's going to be your fallback. Most all law firms take credit cards. That's how a lot of people pay for their attorney's fees, unfortunately. And when you do if there are assets to be divided, even though it'll be 9-12 months in advance, in the future possibly, you can take that money and then obviously use it to pay down or pay off any credit card. But I mean, I think most people do incur significant attorney's fees throughout this process, and they go on credit cards, and there's high debt because of it, and that's going to be your separate debt. But some short-term pain in that sense, in order to secure your future moving forward, it may be worth it.
Yeah, kind of in order of what I would do if I was trying to separate under these situations is, first would be, look around me. What assets do I have access to? So accounts in joint name or accounts in my name that I have access to. Second would be reaching out to friends, family, or other people who are supportive in your life that might be able to provide you either short-term housing or assistance with legal fees or assistance with life expenses. And then third, I would look into options with personal loans, credit cards, or other avenues of credit, so that you have access to capital in the short term while we work through all of the steps that come with getting you both physically and financially separated.
But of course, the very first thing you need to do is have a consult with a lawyer before you separate, before you make the decision that, this is what I'm doing. We really encourage you to talk to a lawyer, so you can have all of your ducks in a row. And we can also help you think of things you may not have thought about in preparing to separate, and what you can do around the house or what you might be able to access.
Absolutely.